Despite what you may think, the beat-em-up genre is still alive and well today. You have games like the Yakuza series that have taken the age-old concept of basing a game's combat around beating the tar out of people with occasional environmental weapons into new directions and dressed it up quite a bit. But at their core, these newer games still owe a lot to their ancestors from the late 80s and early 90s. Outside of maybe Double Dragon, the series that best popularized the basic format of the original beat-em-up game was of course Streets of Rage. Before we go ahead, a quick request. We upload new videos every single day, and your subscription matters a lot. So, please consider subscribing and enabling all notifications by clicking the bell icon. With that out of the way, let's begin. Streets of Rage took the ingredients that Double Dragon laid out, jazzed them up with just the right amount of early 90s flair, made the characters a little more memorable, and before we knew it, we had a classic on our hands, with that original game that would be emulated by countless similar games all the way to today. But while many indie and AA developers may come close to replicating the magic from those original 3 Streets of Rage games, and some would put some very memorable twists on the formula, there was nothing quite like getting an actual canon sequel for the series nearly 30 years later in Streets of Rage 4. Streets of Rage 4 might not have been everybody's cup of tea due to its strict adherence to the gameplay style of its predecessors. But as a throwback to the original games that takes some meaningful steps forward, it does a great job of rising well beyond the knockoffs that have been keeping the seat of the beat-em-up throne warm for it all these years. The first thing you're likely to notice about Streets of Rage 4 is the new direction its visual presentation has gone in. Gone are the blocky pixels of the early 90s. Streets of Rage 4 wisely embraced a more modern look that resembles something out of a comic book more than a video game from 30 years ago. While it's true this did rub some the wrong way when the game was announced, myself included, I have to admit, after actually jumping into the game for a few minutes, it comes together really quickly as a decision that makes a lot of sense. Now that modern systems have way more horsepower than anything from the 90s, the ability to render more enemies on screen with high amounts of detail and subtle animations, as well as interesting environmental effects, has, of course, skyrocketed. To not take advantage of all of the lessons learned in game development over these many years would be simply staying stuck in the past. And Streets of Rage 4 makes it very clear that it's intent on evolving the franchise forward and not just being a simple throwback to earlier times. While you certainly could pull most of that off and still have a retro-style look, after playing Streets of Rage 4 for a few minutes, you'll start to realize that had they done that, you wouldn't have been able to appreciate a lot of the more subtle effects nearly as well as you can with this cleaner, modern look. Characters' clothes and hair move independently of them. Environmental objects stand out more when you interact with them. There are even some cool lighting tricks in different areas that have subtle effects on what the characters look like, and cast a very different mood than they otherwise would. These are all things that are way easier to appreciate and have a greater effect with the modern style. And as a result, the game will age extraordinarily gracefully as more decades come and go. So while some purists might still prefer the original look of the older games, it's also fair to say that those 3 original games still exist, and you can still go play them, and developer Lizard Cube's new ideas should be given a chance. That said, if you are still a stickler for those older visuals, you can unlock original sprites for the playable characters and play with those if you wish. Gameplay is of course king though, and Streets of Rage 4 makes more strides in this area than I think most of us were expecting. While the basic feel and rhythm of a classic Streets of Rage game is definitely here, there were some meaningful and smart tweaks thrown in. Firstly, the dreaded accidentally picking up weapons while trying to attack problem, the one that has led to countless lost lives in classic beat-em-ups, has finally been solved by Lizard Cube simply by making the button to pick up a weapon different from the basic attack button. A silly issue that plagues beat-em-ups even today, thwarted by a simple button mapping decision. Also, juggling enemies has been made far easier by having the ability to bounce them off of walls and off of other opponents. This leads to much longer combo counts, which of course leads to higher scores, more extra lives, etc. On top of the basic combos, grabs, and throws that you would expect, the special attacks that cost a bit of health are also back, but now you also have the ability to gain that life back if you can get some additional hits in quickly enough without getting hit yourself. Another welcome tweak to the formula. Outside of that, Streets of Rage 4 mostly takes the approach of sticking with what worked about the original games and just turning the dial up a few notches. More enemy types keep you guessing throughout the entire game. Varied multi-stage levels beef up the level variety, and of course, the roster of characters is arguably the best the series has ever seen. Axel, Blaze, Adam, and Max are all there, of course, looking appropriately aged to reflect the time that has passed, but still clearly in their prime. But on top of that, you also have newcomers Floyd and Cherry, the former of which is a protege of Dr. Zan, and the latter the daughter of Adam. Together, along with unlockable Dr. Zan, Skate, and Shiva, all in their original forms, they make the Streets of Rage 4 cast easily the strongest one in the series, as it ensures every type of SOR fan is catered to. What is a Streets of Rage game without excellent music, though? The outstanding soundtracks by Yuzo Koshiro really sealed the deal with the original games by communicating the 90s vibe and took advantage of the Sega Genesis sound chip better than most games on the system, while Streets of Rage 4 was mostly composed by Oliver de Riviere, whose more notable credits include Remember Me and Alone in the Dark. Yuzo Koshiro also made some contributions later on in the project's development. The soundtrack we ended up with was excellent as a result. It mirrored much of the philosophy of the rest of the game, with conservative tweaks and modernizations thrown into what is largely the original style of the older games. Developer Lizard Cube has more than shown their ability to revive classic franchises. Between their remake of Wonder Boy 3 from a few years ago and this fully fledged sequel to one of gaming's most beloved classic franchises, we definitely get the picture. They're good at what they do. I'm torn between wanting to see them take a similar approach to Golden Axe or just seeing what they could come up with on their own for a new IP. But whatever they do, I'll be sure to have an eye on it. Until then, Streets of Rage 4 has plenty of meat on the bone to keep us entertained, with online co-op, multiple difficulty levels, lots of unlockables, and of course the upcoming DLC that will be adding multiple new facets to the experience. The old school beat-em-ups might not be for everybody these days, but as far as those go, Streets of Rage 4 is one hell of a game. And that brings us to the end of the video. A quick request: we upload new videos every single day, and if you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing. It really helps us out. Also, don't forget to enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon so that you can receive daily video updates. Thanks for watching.